I want to ask you, how does it feel when someone you don't really know asks you a question like, why did you move here? Why did you leave your job? Why are you changing careers? Why are you still single? Even if someone is simply curious, there's probably a moment where you feel a bit off guard with those questions, like you have to defend your decision or justify something personal. And so, if that has ever happened to you, you already understand the reason for this lesson today. Together, we're going to unpack or learn why asking why can sometimes feel too direct and what to say instead. Because there are definitely much better questions that you can ask in English. Now, before we get into those questions, I want to identify why those kinds of questions, why those situations feel so uncomfortable. And the problem isn't with the word why itself. This isn't a grammar issue. It's about the tone, how that question sounds in the moment, even if the person asking has good intentions or is simply curious. The truth is, in social or professional settings, that direct word, that direct question, why, can come across as confrontational, like you're questioning someone's judgment. It may also sound demanding, like someone expects an explanation. And finally, it could sound judgmental. Again, even if someone's intention is kind. Before we dive in to better alternatives, if this kind of real world English feels helpful to you, I want you to know this is exactly the kind of work we do inside the Confident Women community. Every month, we talk about real life topics in English, like goals, relationships, or making tough decisions so that you can express your thoughts clearly and naturally in English conversations. We also learn the real vocabulary that you actually need to have those conversations in everyday English. And we build up your conversation skills, like asking thoughtful questions, responding with clarity, and adjusting your tone. All of this happens through practice in a supportive space so that you don't just understand English, but you also get comfortable using it. So, if you'd love more opportunities to use English in this way, I'll leave a link below where you can learn more about the Confident Women community. And now let's go through our 6 simple alternatives to asking why. Alternatives that feel warmer, more respectful, and more comfortable in conversations. These phrases are going to help you stay curious without making someone feel like they need to explain or defend themselves. For each one, I'll share a quick example so you can see the question in action. The first one is, what brought you to? This is a great question when you want to find out more about why someone has moved, started a new job, or made a big life change. It's the kind of question that shows interest in their journey or process, not just the decision itself. And it doesn't sound like you're demanding a reason. Now, similar to this, you might hear, how did you end up in? Or what brought you to this point in your life? To see how we might really use this question, I want you to imagine this. You've recently seen someone moving into the house across the street from you, and a few days later, you're both outside. So you get the chance to say hello, and you chat for a few minutes. During that conversation, you get curious. Why did she and her family move here? So, of course, yes, you could say, why did you move here? It's perfectly correct grammatically, but it might feel too direct, especially if you've just met. So instead, you could say, welcome to the neighborhood. What brought you to this part of town? Or what brought you to this neighborhood? It's a really small shift, but it keeps the conversation open and easy. And now, question starter number 2 is, what led you to? This is useful when someone shares a decision, a shift, or a new direction that they want to take. And you may want to understand the thinking or the process behind it. It's a question that invites storytelling, not an explanation. And here are a few natural ways to ask it. You might ask someone, what led you to that decision? What led you to choose X over Y? What led you to take that step? So picture this. Let's say that you've just started an English class, and in your first class, you hear one of your classmates say, I decided to start learning English at 63. When you hear that, you feel surprised and impressed. So you want to know more. In the conversation, you could say, of course, why are you learning English now? But again, that might sound like you're questioning their choice. So instead, you could say, that's so inspiring. What led you to start learning English now? That one little change acknowledges her decision with admiration, and it opens the door for someone to share more. Next up is, how did that come about? This works really well when someone shares unexpected or impressive news, and you're curious about the backstory. This kind of question communicates surprise and interest without any pressure. And here are some natural ways that we might ask it. How did all of that come together? That sounds exciting. How did that happen? Now that we've got those options, let's see how they work in a real scenario. For this one, I want you to imagine that you're talking with a friend of a friend at a weekend barbecue. And this individual casually mentions that she took an early retirement last year. And you want to know more. Was it planned? Was it sudden? So, of course, yes, you could ask, why did you retire early? But again, it may sound like you're asking her to justify her choice. So instead, we could say, wow, early retirement sounds amazing. How did that come about? This question feels light and curious. It gives someone space to share as much or as little as they want. And now, question starter number 4 is, what made you think of? This one is perfect when someone shares a creative idea, a new initiative, or something that feels unexpected. It shows real interest in their thinking process. Similar to this, you could say, how did you come up with that idea? Or what gave you that idea? And here's an example of how to use it. Let's say that you're at a PTA or parent teacher association meeting at your child's school. During a casual conversation, another parent shares that she's starting a book club for senior women in the neighborhood, and you're intrigued. You think it's such a thoughtful idea. So instead of, why are you starting a book club? You could say, that's such a thoughtful idea. What made you think of starting something like that? This question is not just about the decision. You're showing curiosity about what inspired her. And this is the perfect segue into the next one. What inspired? This one is great when someone shares a bold choice, a personal change, or something that they're proud of. It's really a way to celebrate their action and ask about their motivation. Some of the natural variations that we have might be, what inspired you to start doing that? What inspired the change? Or simply, that's amazing, that's fascinating, that's incredible. What inspired it? And here's a quick example. Let's say that you unexpectedly bump into or see a former college roommate while traveling abroad. Super unexpected. So you have a quick back and forth, and you notice that your old college roommate looks energized, healthy, and strong. So in the conversation, she tells you that she's recently started doing some early morning running, and she's been doing it for about 2 years. In that conversation, instead of asking, why did you start running? You could say, you look incredible. What inspired you to start running? This question feels warm, encouraging. And again, it invites her to share something more personal if she wants to. And finally, our last alternative to the question word why is, I'd love to hear how. This is one of the softest and most respectful ways to ask for a story. It puts the other person in control, and it gives them the choice of what to share. Now, similar to that, you may also hear, tell me more. Tell me more about how that happened. Or could you share? Could you share the story of or the background of? And finally, I'm curious about how that started. So once again, let's look at a real life situation. And this time, you're at a networking event. In a conversation, someone mentions that she just started her business during the pandemic, and that catches your attention. It seems like a big move. So, yes, you could say, why would you start a business during the pandemic? But that can sound a bit skeptical. So instead, we could try, that's really impressive. I'd love to hear how that came about for you. This question shows only interest, no judgment. What I love about each of these 6 sentence starters is they let you stay engaged in a conversation without sounding too direct or putting pressure on someone to explain their personal choices. They're very small shifts, but they make a big difference in how comfortable your conversations feel for you and the person you're speaking with. Okay, let's do a quick recap. I want to briefly review each of the 6 alternatives to asking why that you learned here. And I also want to highlight what topics of conversation each one works best for. So the first one was what brought you to, which works well for life changes, moves, or new jobs. And then we learned what led to, which is perfect for decisions or personal shifts. Number 3 was how did that come about, which we might use for surprising or interesting news. The next one was what made you think of, for creative ideas and thoughtful actions. Number 5 was what inspired. What inspired you? And we use this for bold, personal, or meaningful life choices. And finally, I'd love to hear how. This one works well for inviting someone's story. As you may have noticed, these are not complicated phrases, but using them helps you to build trust, keep conversations flowing, and connect in ways that feel natural in English conversations. So now I have a little challenge for you. I want to give you the opportunity to practice. And for this, I want you to think back on a conversation that you've had with someone where they shared something personal with you, like a recent decision that they've made, a career change, a move, or something unexpected. As you think back on that conversation, how could you have responded with one of these questions today? Now, as always, I encourage you to do more than just think about it in your mind. It's always tempting to learn from a lesson like this and think about it. But I want you to take one extra step so that you can easily use these question starters in your conversations. So the first step could be write down your example. As always, you can share it with me in the comments below or write it in a journal where you keep track of what you're learning in English. I also encourage you to say it out loud. Hear how the words sound together when you say them, and then try it in a real conversation. These are excellent ways to make sure that you don't just learn what's in this lesson today, but you also are able to use it in real conversations. With that, thank you so much for joining me today. If you found this lesson helpful, be sure to let me know by following or subscribing wherever you're listening or watching from today. Thanks again, and I look forward to next time.